This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland front of the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. The Cleveland Cavaliers are coming off a 1-2 road trip. Carter, all of our fears about this road trip happen to come true. But you know what? I still think there's some interesting things to talk about. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Still fighting a cold. But you know, had a nice holiday with the family. Not the most fun 3-game stretch of Cavaliers basketball that we ever did see. I was hoping they would steal a win tonight despite a pretty adverse schedule situation and team health situation. They didn't, and now they're gonna make me talk about that Pistons game yesterday, which wasn't that fun either. So it's just a rough couple days. But such is life in over the course of an 82 game season.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear you're doing at least a little better with the cold. That seems to be going around absolutely everywhere. I was dealing with it for a while. It seems to be ripping through the NBA. It seems like a bunch of teams have guys that are either in and out of the lineup or battling through cold and whatnot. Like, I think it's actually
a viral video from the Detroit game will tell you it might have made its way onto the court too.
Let's send the reckless speculation sound on that one there, because we don't know what that was. But happy to see that Jetty was okay after that play.
Of course.
As you mentioned, like, we kind of foresaw this to some extent, and we're talking about this in a while. This is one of 2 stretches that the Cavs have this season where you're playing 4 games in 6 nights in 4 different cities. That's really difficult, and to make matters worse, Toronto was home for over a week and only played twice.
Crazy.
So this was something that we had concerns about going in, made even worse by Jared Allen getting hurt, I believe, 2 minutes into the Milwaukee Bucks game, which changed the complexion of that game, changed the complexion of the weekend overall. But it was just a tough set of circumstances. Pascal Siakam, as well as Scotty Barnes, returning to the lineup for the Toronto Raptors. And let's start things off with Toronto, Carter, because I am nothing if I'm not a man of my word. And you know what? I promised that if we made it through a Toronto Raptors game without a serious injury, I would lay off. I'd lay off some of my angst. I'd lay off some of my frustration. And as frustrating as it was to see the Cavs miss shot after shot in this game, I'm pretty zen. I'm doing pretty well. How you feeling, buddy?
I thought the Cavs played pretty well. It's just one of those things where, like, no shots were going in. Didn't look like Donovan had his legs off the dribble, and even if he did, I think that is one of those things where the Cavs couldn't hit water from a boat in the ocean, and the Raptors could figure that out early in the game. Started over helping on dribble drives from the Cavs guards, it was just they were toast from there. I thought the Cavs played well. I thought they made the right plays most of the time. I think Donovan and Isaac are 2 dudes who I think just had bad games offensively. For the most part, I thought everyone played okay. Like, they just couldn't make any shots. I tweeted this, but if the Cavs had managed to shoot 28% from 3, they would have forced overtime because they lost by 12, and that would have been them going 11 for 38. So just a nightmare shooting evening for the fellas, and you know what, that happens. It happens sometimes, and it's not fun. It's not. But I am glad that the team fought all the way through. And by the way, some really great shot making. I thought they had a nice defensive game too. Toronto had more, Kawhi Leonard-esque shots that hit the rim 6 times before rolling in than I've seen in some time. And it's just one of those nights where they really had it going in that way. Their 3-point shooting was also very good. Anunoby, to his credit, was killing them on these trailer threes. But yeah, I thought the Cavs played a decent game on both ends and lost by 12, which is, cold comfort, but I mean, better than them playing a game I thought that they played bad. I was happier with their effort tonight than I was against Detroit.
Yeah, I completely agree. Honestly, this is a game where you could see things going really poorly because Toronto is a team that is well constructed to give the Cavs fits at times, right? And I don't think this game is necessarily reflective of almost anything in this matchup because even from Toronto's standpoint, they're missing an important piece in Precious Achiuwa. Scotty Barnes is coming back from injury. You could tell like there was some moments of rust for him. Wasn't in the starting lineup. Pascal Siakam's working his way back, even though he hit some really tough shots and was great overall tonight. He's got another level to him too. So I think both teams weren't necessarily at their best in this game. And the reason the Cavs lost isn't kind of the traditional reasons that you would expect against Toronto. Cavs took very good care of the ball tonight. I believe only 10 turnovers, 9 turnovers, fewer turnovers than the Raptors. That's a win. Cavs actually had more fast break points than the Raptors. Usually that's kind of a signature to a Raptors win. Cavs had more offensive rebounds than the Raptors tonight. All those kind of things, like even Darius Garland, like what they can do to pressure guards. And the fact that he only had 2 turnovers, I thought was very encouraging. I thought he had a very, very good game
Darius
against the
was
Raptors.
Good tonight.
Yeah, he was very good. And Donovan Mitchell didn't obviously had
worst game of his Cavs career.
Easily. Snaps a streak of 121 games where he scored at least double digits. OG Anunoby was fantastic against Mitchell. It did seem like even on some open looks, he didn't have his legs overall tonight. Wasn't playing with the same burst that you kind of associate with.
You noticed they gave him the free throw when they drew the defensive 3 seconds. I wondered if that was maybe if you see one go through, Donnie.
Yeah. It didn't seem like he had his legs, but at the same time, OG has really elevated his game this season.
Man, dude can turn his hips on defense.
He's in the argument for best perimeter defenders in the game at this point, and I think he's elevated himself to Toronto's either second or third best player, depending on how you evaluate Fred VanVleet. He has been that good, and he's been great with Siakam and Barnes out and really elevate his game. So you got to give your tip of the cap to them in those spots. But overall, I thought the Cavs played a good team game. There just wasn't execution, and the Detroit game I didn't think was as good. Obviously, I think they came out pretty flat in the first quarter. After that point, it seemed like they were playing with more zip, and again, it was one of those situations where you're just missing a bunch of open looks. I thought the execution was good. It wasn't like Detroit shot exceptionally well. They hit some tough shots, but overall they shot poorly. I thought the Cavs have played 2 pretty good team games just with poor execution, which can happen, especially when you're in these situations where you're shorthanded and at a rest deficit from a scheduling standpoint.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And also, like, a couple of guys are just kind of slumping at a bad time.
Yep.
Jetty's threes, it's funny. Jetty is a guy where you just know whether he is in a good shooting rhythm or not immediately, and it's just the way it comes off his hand. It's very clear. I think Dean, I don't know if it's coming off the knee, but his 3-point jumper looked terrible against Detroit, looked bad tonight. Not just missing makeable shots, but like some really ugly misses where, he wasn't getting his feet right, it wasn't coming off his hands well. And like, we've all played basketball, like we know what that feels like to have a game where like, damn, this does not feel good leaving my hands tonight. And I feel like that really was the case for Wade and Osman. And with Love hurt and LeVert finally back from injury, and he had a rough night as well. You really it really hurts to have those guys not be able to shoot, because then all of a sudden you're like, well, I hope Mobley goes 2 for 2 from 3 like he did against Detroit to kind of save our offense. Like Darius and Donnie tonight, with notwithstanding for Donnie, are going to be able to hit threes, but like you need your role players to be able to shoot to keep the overall integrity of the offense. And right now those guys are slumping, and when those guys are slumping, you have to have superstar efforts from your star players, and the Cavs just didn't have that tonight.
Yeah, they really didn't, and it was great that against Detroit, where Darius and Donovan weren't hitting shots at a high clip, that you had Mobley hit that 3 in the fourth quarter. Isaac hit a 3 in the fourth quarter. I thought Isaac has been playing really well lately. A lot of those percentages were way up, I think, coming into this game. Since his 0 of 12 start, he was shooting just shy of 60% from the floor and 40% from 3. That's coming down after tonight, after a 1 of 10 performance. But honestly, like I thought he played good team basketball. The shots weren't falling, but I kind of like that he was being assertive and taking this. And overall,
I'm fine with 5-3. In fact, he passed up a couple that I was like, Isaac, you got to take those, brother.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I get the calculus when you just don't have your legs, but at the same time, nobody has their legs in a game like that. So you just have to keep taking those looks if they're available, because otherwise the defense is able to cheat too much on attacking the rim. And you got to hope that you can at least generate some offensive rebounds, which they were able to do tonight. Isaac was actually a big part of that equation as well. I believe he pulled in 3 or 4 offensive rebounds. I don't have the box score up right now, but he's been doing good things in that spot. The other kind of notable part of this game was Karis LeVert returning to the lineup, and it was a tough one for our
another
guy.
one, man.
Yeah, and it's obviously a little deflating. You're hoping that after some time off, he can come in and kind of get into a groove. 8 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, but only 2 of 9 shooting. I did like that JB left him in towards the end of the game, just to like, hey,
Miami only had 10 guys.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. But to work through some stuff, I believe both of his makes came in garbage time there. But it's real tough one for him. A couple unforced turnovers, dead ball turnovers, Carter. So not the end of the world.
That bad. Better than a miss, says one podcast host. Yeah, Karis, I don't know,
he
man.
Almost had my favorite turnover of all time when he crashed into the Raptors broadcast booth.
I'm sure that's a trade off you're willing to make 10 times out of 10. I know who
absolutely.
you are. Yeah, I mean, Karis, I think like it's just been kind of I don't know what to make of the season for him right now. Like it feels like he's getting more invisible as the season's gone on the floor, and like after he had a solid little burst where he was getting at least like 15-ish a game, and last 4 games he's played, obviously one of those was against Miami where he got hurt, but 2, 4, 0, and 8 points. Like it's just hard to survive that. And the 3-point percentage has also regressed. He's down to 26.5% in the month of November. The 2-point percentage has gone up, which like is nice, but he's not been able to put it together thus far this season, and it's hard. It's hard for him to get the kind of touches and the time he needs to get up to speed. Obviously, I mean, I talked after the opener about what a terrible matchup I think Toronto is for him. So I'm hoping we get to see him kind of find his footing over the next couple games. But yeah, it's a rough one for Karis in his return, and hopefully that's just him shaking off the rust. But a troubling trend since he's moved to the bench. I was hoping that we'd kind of see him play more Karis ball off the bench than trying so hard to fit in as a starter, and we just haven't seen that.
Yeah, it is tough because when you look at it, and I'm in the same boat as you, like it's really hard to kind of figure out exactly what to make of his season so far, because individually, the 2-point field goal making just hasn't been there all season. It was fine when he was hitting 3-pointers at a high clip. The playmaking's been good. I think he's played good defense overall as well. And he's been rebounding at a great clip as well. But, as the 3-point percentage, it hasn't been there, as he's been a little more loose with the ball recently. It's disappointing, and you hope that he can kind of work his way out of the funk. These things do happen over the course of a season, but the other thing that makes it more confusing from an evaluation standpoint is we're still trying to find a starting lineup that works. I think on paper, you and I have had the same opinion that Dean Wade, along with the guards and bigs, makes the most sense. And I think we'll eventually get to see that. But as of right now, when you look at how those starting lineups have performed, so far the best one has still been with Karis LeVert, a small forward, by a pretty decent margin. And the only lineup that's actually been a positive is the bench minutes when Jetty is out there with the 4 starters.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, just it's been a weird year for the Cavs so far. You know, you mentioned how much better. You tweeted how much better their splits were through 20 games this year than last year, and I've said it a couple times, but there's a lot of stuff that's not going right. Things that aren't aligning appropriately. Like, okay, Dean gets into the starting lineup just as his 3-pointer completely abandons him. He's shooting 25% from 3 in the month of November.
Which isn't a surprise, right? Like, he missed significant time with a knee infection, and like, you're not going to be doing cardio when you have a knee infection. Like, you're going to need some time to get back into game shape. So
I still think that the Dean starting lineup is the move, but like right now the spacing on the floor is just not very good because none of the Cavs role players can shoot. I'm not saying they can't forever, but right now they can't. And man, do they miss Kevin Love at a time like this. Just a guy who can come in, add that spacing, add that high variance, high volume 3-point shooting. That's like the Cavs have a bunch of like almost shooters right now. Like when Jetty's cooking, he's a shooter. When he's not cooking, he's not a shooter. Same for Dean. Certainly the same for...
That's some great analysis, Carter. When they're not making shots, they're not shooters.
Well, yeah, but it's... I think they tend to go through bigger swings than Kevin Love does. And having that kind of consistency, like I was thinking about it, and like there's no road to this, and it's not a player that I'm super interested in, but like imagine what a nice time Duncan Robinson or just a pure shooter of that ilk would have with this starting lineup. Like they would just be spoon-fed easy shots all day. And the Cavs just don't really have one of those absolute killer shooters right now, and while that's the roster, until someone starts to find consistency, I think we're going to have these kind of up and down lineup swings where it's like, oh, this lineup seems like it should be really good. No one was just making shots. So those lineups aren't going to do well for a little while.
Yeah, and I think your best path to that internally is for Dean Wade to get back into a rhythm, because you look at who he was at the start of the year, and in a lot of ways he was playing a role similar to what Grant Williams does with Boston, where just that guy that can kind of play between both forward spots, hit threes at a good clip, just plays good team basketball that completes a lot of lineups. So I have faith in kind of riding it out with Dean. But
so I got words for Dean. You got to stop guarding with your hands, my friend. When you play with your hands down and you don't reach, you are a very, very, very good defensive player. Like you don't have to do. I don't need you to force turnovers. I don't need you to get strips. I just want you to play arms at your sides when they're driving, and arms straight up when they're shooting. Like he's getting himself in trouble playing with his hands, and I think you're right. And Fino, who is in my Twitter mentions and in the YouTube chat, just said thank you in all caps, because he's been harping on the handsiness from Dean. But to that point, like that's what you do when you're getting your conditioning back.
Yeah, I mean, that was my go-to as a defender in high school basketball. Is if I had to shuffle my feet, I'm putting my hands in there. I'm like, don't make me move laterally, for the love of God.
And God knows, I'm sure your coach loved that about you.
Oh yeah, they absolutely love me, man. Just the absolute favorite. No, like I think he's the clearest path to that. And when you talk about like how the Cavs have done so well up to this point, and honestly, I'm very pleased with where they're at. I think November, when you look at it, was their toughest month of the season. I'm pretty happy. They got a real test with this Philadelphia game again. It's going to be another fourth game
in November with a bang.
Yeah, fourth game in 4 cities in 6 days. It's the tail end of that stretch there again. Joel Embiid back for Philly. Tobias Harris played really well for them in a win against Atlanta. That's not going to be a pushover game, so that's a big one. But
before
overall,
you jump into that, I do think it's important, and this is your stat, so I want to tee you up for it. If you are, we spent a lot of time complaining about last year's schedule. This year's schedule actually is good news for the Cavs that they've gotten through this part of the schedule. Can you elaborate on the rest game, the rest disadvantage situation moving forward?
Well, I was just saying that this is the last stretch that the Cavs will have where they play 4 games in 4 cities in 6 days. There's only one more at the end of January. After that, there's not a single one of those for the rest of the season. We talked about it before when we were previewing the season. The Cavs actually have more rest advantage games or fewer rest disadvantage games than any other team in the league. They're tied with a few teams. A lot of those games came in November, and the strength of schedule was very tough. Cavs had the 6th toughest strength of schedule coming into this game. I assume it's a little harder because Toronto's a very good team. But, like from a rest standpoint, from a trying to find your groove standpoint, the fact that you have a much better record than you did last season, the fact that your metrics across the board, offense, defense, net rating, all of that is better, is very encouraging. And you're doing this with 11 starting lineups in the first 21 games. Like when we talk about the starting lineup looking to find a groove and find a rhythm, that was going to be a process integrating Donovan Mitchell in, even if you had stability within the roster. And yes, there's been obviously ups and downs, with each of the candidates to start at small forward, but those lineup changes have been as the result of injuries. And I'm not framing this as the Cavs have had bad injury luck compared to the rest of the league. Compared to the rest of the league, we're right in the middle of the pack. This is completely normal. This is what the NBA is right now.
But bad injury luck during your hardest schedule month will lead to some up and down play. And by the way, if you're wringing your hands right now, team's still on pace for 51 wins.
No, baby.
At the current record. I'm not saying like that's if you're a little disappointed about how things have gone thus far, like given this recent stretch, and I get it, like the 4-game win streak was against some beatable teams, Miami without Jimmy and Hero,
missing guys,
missing Dame. So like, if you are a pessimist, I guess I get it. Like the last 10 games haven't been awesome. But like I still think that there is enough mitigating circumstances that you look at it and go, well, we got a couple bad draws and still on pace for 51 wins. And if you have any expectation that things will kick back up, which I think both of us do, this is you're still cooking with gas, my friend.
How dare you make that assumption of me, Carter?
I would never. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's we're obviously hoping for a little more stability with the lineup and rotation, just so that we can evaluate some of this stuff. Stability is really important, and stability is the name of the game with our partner Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Carter, I do want to circle back to the Milwaukee game, because obviously the injury to Jared Allen in the opening minutes of that game changed the complexion of that game. He wasn't himself after that point. I think he was one of the few Cavs with a positive plus minus in that game. But I do want to point out something that I noticed in the third quarter, which was obviously that was the Cavs' roughest quarter of the season. The defense, the bottom fell out to some extent, but wasn't their worst defensive quarter of the season. What made it so bad was that they weren't able to answer any of the offense. And obviously, Jared Allen is an important part of getting guys going. He's an important cog of the offense. We were talking about it, how the bigs are so important to the offense. But I thought that was a moment where I was hoping both either one, but more so Garland and Mitchell, would kind of step up and be a stabilizing force in those times. And I think that's an opportunity for growth as he continues to mature his game, because there was a lot of times in the third quarter where I thought, he made the right play. He passed it to a guy that was open. There was a lot of times where Lopez on a switch had deep position and he would dump it into him. But when the team is in that kind of a funk, sometimes you have to kind of understand, okay, this is my opportunity to really stabilize things, to generate an easy bucket, to kind of be that spark that we need. And I actually think Garland did a good job of that in the third quarter against Toronto. He was doing a lot of what I would have liked to see against Milwaukee, but it's just kind of recognizing the flow of the game and stepping up, because even though I think Mitchell's always going to be the leading scorer for this team, the keys are still in Garland's hands. And I thought that was an opportunity for growth. And I was kind of encouraged to see that some of that followed through and actually occurred in the Toronto game.
Well, first off, I think I feel like I watched that third quarter of the Milwaukee game just reiterating that Giannis is the greatest player in the world.
Yeah, he's the best player in the world, and that's the best team in the NBA. That's a big part of it too.
I felt watching that game like what I imagine Raptors fans felt when LeBron just decided games were over. Yeah. Like I think the Cavs, I think all your analysis is really on point. I think you're right that, like sometimes being a star means you don't make the right play and feed Robin Lopez on the short roll on a night where he's having a hard time. And it's just figuring something out. But man, is that Bucks team a well-oiled machine. They're missing their second best player, in my opinion, in Middleton. Mm-hmm. And they are just.
Although our buddy Ty Windish would fight you on that one.
Is he a Drew guy? Does he put
He's a Drew guy
over?
now?
That's nice. I don't agree.
I don't agree either.
I think that I thought Giannis just completely imposed his will on that third quarter, especially on the defensive end. And man, is Brook Lopez playing like he's like 28, the way he's moving out there on defense. Like that block on the Darius floater, I could not believe he got to that. Ultimately that's a title contender saying no, the game's over now. A title favorite saying that, and like ultimately on the road, sometimes, especially when you're kind of feeling yourself after a 4-game winning streak, sometimes that's going to happen, and the Cavs have done that to teams this year where they've decided the game's over. In fact, we call them Cavalanches, Justin.
Yeah, we do. Honestly, I think the comparison to like LeBron era versus LeBronto at that time, like it's fitting, like, because especially with Jared Allen out of that game, Allen's a big part of the defensive infrastructure to slow down Giannis. And honestly, like he's our third best player still at this point. Like I don't think that's a bold statement. I think he's integral to everything the Cavs do. He was an all-star for a reason, and I think he's elevated his game this season overall. But if Allen's out of the lineup, the defensive counter that JB had come up with that was actually really effective in the first matchup was Lamar Stevens. You didn't even have that as an option. So at that point, I felt like if Giannis is getting going like that, if he's hitting multiple threes, if he's just imposing his will in that way, you kind of have to go out there and maybe trade buckets for a little bit. Like sometimes you just have to do that if you don't have an answer defensively, and you hope that there's not many teams where that's going to be the case.
And even their scheme is really hard for the Cavs, man. The drop coverage with, Brook, playing like just unbelievably fundamental defense. He's just dropping the exact right amount to still bother the guys on the pull up, while still walling off and keeping them. They don't have to send help. Mm-hmm. And you go, okay, well, I don't want to deal with Brook Lopez in the middle of the floor because he's playing perfect defense. Let's run pick and roll with the other guy. Oh, it's the best defensive player in the league, Giannis Antetokounmpo. So, and Ben Taylor from Stratechery and noted Uber Bucks fan was in our mentions after that game, just saying like it's just tough for the Cavs. Against 28 other teams, their bigs are just the reason they're better, and the Bucks bigs are better, and I do think that, and obviously like Mobley, Allen is much better than Brook at this point. Well, maybe not much better. Brook's having an amazing year. Yeah. I think Allen's better than Brook, but Giannis is the best player in the world. And that difference between a 90th percentile big and the 100th percentile big is massive. And when the Cavs don't have that advantage and they're playing defense where they don't have to send help, so it's basically like Darius and Donovan, you're just going to have to hit 500 pull-up threes. And I hope that, and also Javon Carter and Drew Holiday are absolute maniacs fighting over every screen and on your back hip the whole time. Like, it's a tough matchup. I want no part of that team in the playoffs. I think the Cavs can compete. I think the Cavs can beat any team in the postseason. Right now, I don't think they can beat a healthy Bucks team.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's part of why I say that I look forward to those matchups, because I do think the Cavs have the personnel to beat the Bucks in a game. I think that they have enough talent to beat the Bucks, and we've seen them do that. But it requires a really high level of execution and requires a really high level of it requires a really high level of discipline, and that's why I really look forward to those matchups, because I think it's an interesting challenge for them, right? And what I really love, and I pointed this out, the next times we play the Bucks, Wednesday, December 21st, and then we play them January 21st, exactly 1 month apart. And I kind of find that interesting, right? Because over the course of a season, it's a way to kind of like, it really is a litmus test, but it's an opportunity to see how much growth you've had month to month in those games. Obviously, the way that I'm viewing things right now could be ruined if one or both teams have some injuries in those matchups. But I do think that they are that team that I'm like, you know what, like we really have to play a perfect game. So I'm interested to see what the Cavs do in those matchups. But when it comes to like Garland in the third quarter there, like I'm always trying to look for some sort of kind of interesting takeaway or some sort of lesson. But you're right. Like sometimes it's just Giannis being Giannis, but at the same time, that's not really interesting as analysis at the same time.
Well,
right?
I do think it's interesting, only insofar as like that is greatness. And it's kind of, and like, even though I'm talking about a team that just eviscerated my favorite team in a quarter, like it's hard not to appreciate that level of execution from them. Yes, Cavs could have been better, but like that was just like that was something to survive. Like not like that onslaught was something to survive, not something to like overcome. And they did not survive. Spoiler alert, they got run off the floor. But but like I just think like I don't know, just watching a team be that good, and it's just I think it is interesting, and it's instructive for like what it means to be a true contender, and what the Cavs are going to need to be able to do over the next couple of years, because Giannis ain't going away, gang. He's like 27 or some ridiculously young age. The league is so darn good. But I think you're right that it was nice to see Darius kind of take a lesson from that. And I do think he and Donovan really closed very well against Detroit to kind of take care of that game. And I don't know if they had Milwaukee on the mind, or just like, oh gosh, we got to put these Pistons away. But again, it's a long season, man. A lot of hills and valleys.
Yeah, it is a long season, a lot of wins and lessons, right? And I tweeted after the Detroit game, like, some of it you can attribute to, okay, we just missed some open shots and that sucks. But when you don't take care of business, when you have to play a lot of the starters, like kind of high 30s in minutes on a situation where you're going to be at a rest disadvantage the next night, like some of the tired legs that the Cavs had in this game, you can attribute it to just not executing against Detroit. And that's one of those things about like managing an 82 game season is it's a missed opportunity. The most important thing is getting that win, because we talked about it on Wednesday's pod, where I said we very well can see another valley for the Cavs, because there's going to be peaks and valleys. There's going to be winning streaks and losing streaks. But we very well could see it this weekend because of the scheduling situation. And their best chance to beat Toronto was by taking care of business against Detroit in three quarters, especially with Cade and Boyan out. I thought Detroit played really hard, and they played well. But at the same time, when you give them hope, when you come out flat in those games and kind of inspire them to get going and to compete, and hey, maybe this is one that we can steal, you're in for a tougher night if you don't set that tone early in the game.
And it is fair to say, I mean, there's another game where the Cavs couldn't shoot. I don't know if the Cavs are going to have another 2-game stretch where they shoot 22% from three. They're 15 of their last 66 threes.
Oof.
Like just, bananas poor shooting. Going back to the Milwaukee game, it might be even uglier.
In the Detroit game, I just looked it up. Closest defender 4+ feet away. You were 7 of 24, so not great, Bob.
Oh my God! So yeah, they just can't shoot right now, man. Yeah. I hate it. I hate to say it because it seems so reductive from an analysis standpoint, but like it's really hard to win NBA games easily, especially easily, which you were hoping to do against Detroit.
Yeah, Carter, just for me, say make or miss league, please.
Make or miss league.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is one of those stretches of the year where things aren't easy, and I would argue that they had a stretch where things were easy. I mean, that 4-game winning streak, like they had 4 relatively, 3 out of 4 games. Things felt good and relatively easy, and now they have to fight through it. So,
yep.
Such is life.
And all context aside, like you can point out, guys under the weather, tough situations, injuries, all that stuff. Like they've just been a better team at home versus the road, and you can look
teams.
You can look at all the context that went into those road losses, and I know it all, like each individual thing you can look at it and point to in those games. But at the same time, like there's a bit of a sample size here, and that's something that you hope that they can turn around as the season progresses. It's great to take care of business at home. Really, the only home loss was that Minnesota one, which again, I hate when you have such a quick turnaround after a long West Coast trip. I think as we look
guys are trying to hang out with their families for the first time in a week and a half, and get groceries ordered, and then they got to go play a game. It's such a bad spot.
Yeah, I think that having a little bit more of a break. I think Dwayne Casey was actually just arguing for that the other day, where if you have a West Coast trip, that you should at least have a 2-day rest before you play at home. I think that, and also this like 4 games in 6 nights in 4 cities thing. Like I know the league's done a great job of cutting down on travel, and I think it's going to improve the product overall. But those would be tweaks that I would suggest for sure. But the one thing from that Detroit game, and honestly, again from tonight against Toronto, is Evan Mobley really bounced back from that Bucks game, because he struggled like crazy. I thought that was his roughest game of the season in Milwaukee, where he was really trying to get things going and kept running into the best defensive interior defensive pairing in the league.
That play, Giannis just pinned his shot against the backboard. I'm like, woo!
Yeah. I thought he has responded really well with 2 strong games overall. Like this Toronto game, he was great in this game outside of the missed threes. I definitely think it's interesting that you have 13 3-point attempts in the first 19 games, and then you go 2 of 6 over the last 2. Seems like he's trying to. I like it too, and you know what, like. Even the game against Milwaukee, it's frustrating in the moment, especially when you have high hopes for these games. But we talked about it before the season, Carter. Like, we kind of understand that if you're going to let Mobley try stuff, it's going to look ugly at times. There's going to be issues, but you kind of hope that, hey, if he's trying to get to the rim a little more off the dribble, if he's trying to create, that these are things that as the season progresses, that he can get better and better at, and that you continue to see growth. Like, how comfortable are you with kind of letting Mobley play around a little bit with some of these possessions and have some trial and error in his game?
I think what I've liked out of his recent stretch, obviously Bucks game notwithstanding, is that like he's kind of going back to like doing like what made him successful last year plus. Like a little quicker on the draw on the floater than he was last year. Attacking closeouts with that little jab step move. I think, again, we talked about it recently, but I am not super interested in watching him stretch himself if it's 3-4 bumps in the post against someone who is a power forward or a center.
Yeah.
That I'm not interested in seeing, because I don't really know if that's ever going to be his game, or at least what I think his optimal version of Evan Mobley is. But like watching him stretch himself by taking some spot up threes, sure, yeah, absolutely. And I thought he was really good tonight. I think if the team was shooting better, he would have continued to do well. But as I noted, the Raptors tripled down on packing the paint once they realized no Cav could shoot a three. And obviously, I think he won us the game against Detroit. So, very pleased with his season so far. And I really liked your stat about his volume scoring that I will now tee you up for.
Yeah. So last season he had 12 games where he scored 20 or more. He's already had 6 games this season, obviously on pace to really increase that.
And two away from his 7th tonight.
Yeah. He was good against Toronto. Like, honestly, it was just he missed those threes, but I kind of like that he's taking them. Like, I wouldn't
15
mind
boards tonight too.
That to me is the biggest thing. Like, over his last 10 games, he's up to 12 rebounds a game, 3 assists. The points stay kind of steady at 15, but I'm pretty fine with that, right? Like, if the 20-point games become a little bit more frequent, like 15 to 18 points per game, like that to me is kind of the range that I'd love to see him at this year, because at the end of the day, like we kind of expect him to still be the 4th best player on this team, right? Like, Garland and Mitchell are established and playing at all NBA levels this season. Jared Allen is playing once again at an all-star level, and Mobley is still just 21 years old. And honestly, what this start to the season for Evan Mobley reminds me of a lot is what we saw with Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, and what you see with a lot of second-year guys around the league. Like, I think I saw people get worked up over the start that Cade Cunningham had before he got injured. Scotty Barnes, his numbers are down to start the year. Mobley's numbers aren't down. They're pretty similar to last year. Efficiency, rebounding, all that stuff is up compared to last year. But I think he's trying things more this year. Like, I feel like he's been more efficient and getting the same production. And
I think his jumper's been a little worse. So, I mean, I think there's room for that efficiency to even improve, just to hit last year's, jump shot numbers.
Yeah, but I feel like he's been more consistently assertive with attacking the basket off the dribble. I think his handle overall, while he still kind of gets broken up at times, I think he's looked a lot better in that area and is able to generate more offense for himself. And it really does remind me of Garland and Sexton, where to start year 2, the numbers were either down or they were similar to their rookie years. And we started to get nervous. Like, we got nervous about Sexton's 3-point shooting because he had just, and stop me if this sounds familiar, he had just redone his shooting form, and through I think it was 30 games in November and December where he shot 22% from 3 and looked scared to take them before getting his 3-point percentage up to the season for 38% for the year. Garland had a great second half of the year, where when you're coming in year 2, I think you're trying things out. You're figuring out what's kind of ready for the bright lights, what's not. You're experimenting, getting everything that you added to your game to game speed. And I would expect as the season progresses that we start to see more and more of these nights where Evan Mobley just looks more and more dominant on the offensive end. I don't expect a massive leap coming in this year, but if the flashes can keep becoming more frequent, if he can continue to improve his work on the boards and rounding out his game, I'm really encouraged with what I've seen from Mobley so far this season.
Yeah, I think I'm overall encouraged. I mean, I think the efficiency, I think the things that are not going great should be getting better. And I certainly have not lowered my Evan Mobley ceiling 1 iota yet.
No, 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 most certainly not. That would be a little bit ridiculous if you were doing that at this point. Like I get it. You watch the summer highlights and you hope for him to be Kevin Durant because he was practicing against KD, but that's just not realistic. It's nice to see though that his true shooting percentage up 4%, his rebounding percentage up 2%. Like across the board, a lot of his game has improved, and even though the scoring numbers are about the same, I think there's a lot of signs there that growth is coming from Mobley. So
yeah,
I'm
and
really
again,
encouraged.
I just want to continue to go back. I care so much about this guy's rebounding. That's actually one thing that I angsts me a little bit, because like I was pretty disappointed with his rebounding in October. He averaged 6 rebounds a game in those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games to start the year. Since the loss to Golden State, 13, 13, 7, 18, 10, 9, 12, 8, 13, 15. That's what I want to see out of this dude. Like, there is no reason for him not to be a dominant defensive rebounding force. And it's a really important part of what's going to take this team's defense from elite to, uber elite. You got to end possessions, and I'm happy to see him taking that challenge, especially tonight against one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the league.
Yeah. To your point, averaging over 10 rebounds a game in November through 15 games. So that's a definite sign of growth, and a sign of some of the strength he's added, right? Like I think the dribble drive isn't all the way there, but I'm encouraged that he is such a significant part of the Cavs offense, not just by taking shots, but how they run things through him. He's a significant part of a much improved Cavs offense. And obviously the addition of Donovan Mitchell makes a big difference there. But part of what you were hoping for is, hey, Mobley can provide that front court initiation. And as we try to make up for whatever gaps exist in the roster through internal development, Mobley being a front court creator is our best path to having that kind of point forward or guy that can alleviate some of the pressure for the guards. So I think that this growth is really important, even though I think sometimes people want to see it a little quicker or at a pace that's unrealistic.
Absolutely, my friend. Absolutely. Things are gonna kick up back here pretty soon. I know it's been a weird couple games, but I once this team gets home, gets a little bit healthier, I'm excited for the next couple weeks.
Yeah, fingers crossed that Jared Allen can come back against Philly. That's very important. We saw what it's like to play the Sixers without Jared Allen last season, and you know what? I wasn't a big fan of it. So I hope that he is available for Wednesday's game. That's going to be another tough one. I think. I think you're still going to be dealing with some tired legs, but it's going to be nice to get back home, and then they have an opportunity to take care of business against the Magic. Little 2-game homestand here before I believe they take off on that Texas trip. But big thanks to everybody. Well, no, that's not the Texas trip. That's after that they go to New York. Then they're home for Lakers, Kings, and Thunder. Before
thank God I didn't start the goodbye music.
Yeah,
you swerved me. My hand was near the trigger, my friend.
You know, I had to pull up the schedule and correct myself because we got to get the facts right here, Carter. We're better than that. So you know what? I do think that this is an opportunity, really, where almost all of these games are at home, with the exception of the Sunday game against New York. This is an opportunity to start off December on the right note, get into a groove, and take advantage of the fact that you have a ton of home games in December. The schedule is a lot more forgiving, and I think that this is a real opportunity for the Cavs. We are home over the Christmas. They host Toronto as the first game before Christmas, or the last game before Christmas. Utah, Milwaukee, Toronto is that little homestand.
Well, let's serve some home cooking back to the Raptors. I can't abide by this. I know I would like that,
Carter. I'm looking forward to what December brings. Hopefully they can get a win over the Sixers. I think that's going to be a really important game. We will be podcasting after that game, going live after the broadcast ends. For everyone that tunes in live on YouTube, we really do appreciate you guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.